everybody, I'm Alyssa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to talk about the astrology of February 1st through 7th. We have a Leo full moon, Uranus turns direct, as well as a couple other aspects. So we're going to get into all of that. Before we do, quick reminder to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That way you don't miss anything that we have going on here. These weekly videos, they come out every Saturday. We have live meditations Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That is an astrologically guided meditation that dovetails off of the astrology for the upcoming week. If you find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, that's where all posts, updates, and things like that are shared. The weekly intention that comes out Friday, which is associated with the meditation and the upcoming week's astrology, is always shared there. So yeah. Find us on all of the things so that way we can walk this astrological journey together. And of course, meditativeastrology.com is the hub for all of the things. So let's go ahead and get right into this week here, shall we? We start out on Sunday, February 1st with the full moon in the sign of Leo. This happens at 5:09 p.m. Eastern Time. So just after 5 o'clock, translate to your own time zone. 13 degrees, 3 minutes is where I have this clocked at here. I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up here for a minute while we talk about this, so that way you can just see what we are working with. So this chart is set for noon on Sunday. I like to start with a noon chart before I start changing things around. So let's go here forward to the time of the full moon here. So we have the moon excuse me, at 13 degrees of Leo, and then we have the sun at 13 degrees of Aquarius. What I want to point out here first is that stellium of planets that we still have in the sign of Aquarius sitting there with the sun. And then if you look in opposition in the sign of Leo, we have just the moon sitting there, right? So there's this huge concentration of Aquarian energy at the time of the Leo full moon. And that, I think that's going to paint a little bit of a picture of what we have going on here. So this full moon is taking place in the sign, excuse me. The full moon is taking place with the sun in the sign that the solar eclipse is going to take place in February. We have our first Aquarius full moon as the axes start to shift. We'll be talking more about that as we get a little bit closer to it here. So this moment feels like it has some relation to what is going to be starting, what is going to be initiating within the Aquarius Leo eclipses that we are going to have coming in. That is a new cycle that we are moving into. We have been having eclipses across the Pisces Virgo axis, and we're still going to have those mixed in there, but we're going to start shifting towards Leo and Aquarius here. So there's an opening, there's a starting or initiating or a new pattern that is going to be emerging through these eclipses in these houses, right? And right before that process starts here, we have a full moon, we have a culmination in the place of Leo here. So we have a height. That makes me wonder what needs to come to its highest expression, to its fruition, comes into light in this space that the eclipses are going to be working on. So maybe what needs to come to light, what needs to be shown, what needs to come about before the eclipses come in here. It seems a little bit like a precursor here. When you're talking about the Leo full moon and you're looking at anything across the Leo and Aquarius axis, which will apply to the eclipses as well, you are looking at that collective and individual energy and the ways that they intermingle and contrast, right? We can often look at Leo and Aquarius as me versus we, or me and you, right? Or me or you. The collective and the individual for sure. So it doesn't have to be isolating, but it can be, right? So Aquarius is the collective space. It's the we, right? Leo is the me, the individual. It's the place of the sun here. So a Leo is the sun, it's the solar expression, right? It's the individual, it's the one, it's letting that light shine from within you. When I think of Leo, I think of like that song from when I was a kid, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, like that type of thing when I think of Leo. Ideally, we can, in the sign of Leo, we can authentically express ourselves while still remaining aware of the whole picture here. Right? Stellium in the sign of Aquarius, there's a lot of that collective, group, cumulative looking at the whole bigger picture energy here. But then we have this moment where we're stepping into the individual energy, where we're stepping into that solar light, right? So we're stepping into our own authentic energy, maybe versus like what is good for the collective or the whole, right? Or the whole picture, or maybe what is the ideal perspective or the ideal image of which direction we should be going, which we can often find ideal ideologies in the sign of Aquarius. The full moon in the sign of Leo might be a moment that says, instead of looking towards that idealness, instead of looking towards, you know, the bigger whole or the greater good, can't I just be me for a moment, right? Can't I just be authentic? And that might feel like it's a little harder to reach when you look at the stellium of planets we have in the sign of Aquarius, right? We have all of the personal planets there. They've all just went through this conjunction with Pluto. The Sun is there, Mars is there, Mercury is there, Venus is there, and then Pluto's there for a very, very long time. So there's this concentration of Aquarius energy, and we're going to start to feel that more as we start to shift towards these eclipse points here as well. So there's a lot of Aquarius, right? So maybe this is a moment to just stop, pause, and step away from that collective for just a moment. It does not mean to forget about others. It does not mean that we should just totally become self-absorbed or selfish or some of those negative cliches that can be associated with the sign of Leo here. But really just focus on ourselves, right? Focus on our own heart center, a moment of self-love, self-appreciation, and self-gratitude that can radiate from the inside outward. When I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about that heart center energy of Leo, I was thinking about how energy can amplify from the inside and extend outward. And I had that, the image of the Grinch, right? From The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And when he has that moment where he hears everybody down in Whoville start singing after he stole all the presents, and like then his heart starts to grow, right? It grows like twice its size, and then it keeps growing and growing and growing. That growth, that heart space, heart-centered growth, and that change of perspective for him came from the happiness of others, right? Others celebrating and others being able to lift up. Well, some of the most positive work in the sign of Leo can come from allowing everybody to shine, right? Leo wants to be authentic, and Leo wants to be able to allow itself to shine, its individual light to shine, but it wants everybody to be able to do that individually, right? And those lights can be very different from one another. Leo is not going to put itself limit itself in any way to allow others to shine, where maybe Aquarius is willing to kind of sometimes step back and take the back seat sometimes in order to let others share the spotlight. Leo is the spotlight. Leo wants the spotlight there. So this is an interesting moment here. Full moons are always contrasting energies, right? Because the sun and moon are always in opposition to each other. But when we have this concentration of Aquarian energy like we have here, it really feels like, and literally shows a picture of the moon, which can be our environment, our emotions, our own mental processing, right? Our conscious and subconscious conditionings that can be within us, standing apart from these other planets here. So it may really feel like there's the urge to separate yourself a little bit, right? Or to be able to identify within yourself a little bit more here this week here. So that's where we're leading off this week. We're leading off with that Leo full moon here, right at the beginning of the week. So then if we go forward here into Monday, we don't have any exact aspects. We're going to follow the moon from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. It's going to make a couple lunar aspects. And that Virgo moon is going to take us right into Tuesday, February 3rd. No exact aspects here either. However, if we go forward into Wednesday, February 4th, Uranus moves into direct motion this day. So Sunday, Monday into Tuesday, Uranus is slowing down. It's stationing from retrograde period, moving towards the direct period. We have had Uranus in the retrograde period since early September. So you can think about the retrograde period from September to early February here, right? That retrograde period started in early Gemini, I believe at like 1 degree of Gemini, and then Uranus retrograded back into the sign of Taurus, where it's spent the greater portion of like 7 years. I think it was 2018 when Uranus moved into the sign of Taurus. And then it moved forward into the sign of Gemini for a short little stint here in 2025. And now it moved back into the sign of Taurus. And now it's stationing to go direct again. So it's going to move through those last few degrees of Taurus here. This is going to be the last time that Uranus is in the sign of Taurus for this time. It's going to be like another 80 years before Uranus makes its way back into the sign of Taurus. So for a lot of us, this is the last time we're going to see Uranus in the sign of Taurus within our lifetime, right? I mean, I certainly expect that to be the case for me, because otherwise I would live to be way past the life expectancy. So for a lot of us, we're coming into the period here with Uranus moving direct and moving forward into our last days with Uranus in the sign of Taurus. It's going to move back into the sign of Gemini late April, April 25th into April 26th, depending on your time zone and where you are at there. So the retrograde period, what we're coming out of. There is the typical retrograde things, right? Reevaluation, reworking, revisiting. There is an introspection that can come with retrogrades. There is a internalization that can come with retrogrades here, right? So Uranus represents disruptions. It's the rebellion, it's the chaos, it's the shifts and the changes that can happen. It's the awakener, right? So during the retrograde period, these shifts and these changes and the awakening can happen within us, or there can be an internal response based on outside circumstances that we are processing internally, but the awakener within, right? So that's the period that we've been in from September to February. Things might be a little bit more inward. If it seems like maybe before September, you know, like last summer into early fall, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, if it seemed like things were really shifting and really moving kind of quick, and maybe there were some sudden, exciting, unexpected things that were happening, and then maybe you notice a slowing, right? Maybe you notice things internally shifting rather than externally like they were before around that September timeframe. That can kind of give you a little idea of maybe where Uranus has been playing out within your own life and your own chart. It's different for all of us because we all have different circumstances, different lives, different charts, right? You all hear me say that quite often here. So again, if the faster pace was occurring, especially with that early Gemini, right? Uranus had entered Gemini and went through just, 0 degrees, 1 degree, whatnot. That early Gemini suggests that there were new pathways, maybe, that were coming through. And then again, that might have slowed down, paused, or delayed for a little bit. Well, now as Uranus shifts and turns, that could begin to ramp up again, because we're starting to move forward into that direct motion here now, right? The stationing periods, the changing of direction periods are often loud for the majority of people. Uranus might be a little bit louder for some of us depending on placements that we have. So if you have things within those later degrees of fixed signs here, it might be a little bit louder here. If you have things in the early degrees of mutable signs like Gemini, then it might be a little bit louder for you once Uranus enters the sign of Gemini. So you can kind of consider those type of things, or we can do a reading to talk about that too. So now that Uranus is going direct and moving forward, now maybe that internal response, that internal awakening, that shifting that has been happening within, maybe now we can start to externalize that change that has happened within us, right? These are those last steps in the sign of Taurus. So this is the last moments for changes and alterations to happen in the sign of Taurus. We've had Uranus and Taurus for the majority since 2018, right? 7 years, that's a long time for all of us. We all have big shifts in our lives over a 7-year span. There's a ton that can happen in that period of time. So it might start to feel like we're tying up loose ends where Uranus has been acting in the Taurus house. So think about the house topics of where you can find Taurus in your chart. I suggest using the whole sign house system. That is what I use, but whatever house system suits you, whichever you prefer. So now I'm wondering, now that Uranus is moving direct for the last time here, is this the pole where we really feel the desire to embody these shifts? Right? We're coming to the last days, we're coming to the last months, and the last time we're going over these degrees, over 27, 28, 29 Taurus here. So where do you feel the pull to bring a change in the area where you find Taurus in your own life, right? Within your own chart. What has served its purpose in the Taurus house? What are the changes that have happened in the last 7 years or so? And where do you really feel the pull to embody, or where do you see it showing in a physical way here? Taurus is an earth sign, so it can really be physical, it can really be in the material world, and it can be something that is very sensual, something that is very felt and noticed by the different senses here. So it can feel very physical and it can feel very tangible here as Uranus starts to shift forward here. So as Uranus shifts forward, that is going to be the key moment of some of our aspects that we're going to have happen here this week. So we have Wednesday, Uranus stations direct here, right? If we move forward into Thursday, Mercury is going to move into a square with Uranus, just as Uranus is stationing to go direct. Now this is like Wednesday night into Thursday morning, so you could be feeling this Tuesday, Wednesday into Thursday. So, really as Uranus is stationing, Mercury is moving into that square here. Mercury is emerging as the evening star, just as Uranus is just moving into direct motion. Now, Mercury emerging as the evening star, what does that mean? Mercury has just went through the conjunction with the sun here. We've talked about that a couple weeks ago. So then there's a period of time as the planets start to separate away from the sun before you can see them in the evening sky, right? So we're getting closer to that point where you can start to see Mercury in the evening sky, and as it separates and it moves into visibility, there's a symbolism of Mercury being able to express itself a little bit more clearly, a little bit louder, or a little bit more externally. For others, maybe for where you can see it a little bit more on the outside, right? So the shifts and the changes that might be happening for Mercury while it's still what we call under the beams of the sun, or it's still close enough to the sun, they might be kind of working in the background or internally, or they haven't quite manifested into the material world quite yet, but the seeds are there, and maybe you can start to see the swirlings of it here. So this is a new path for both Uranus and for Mercury here as they're coming into the square position here. So I'm wondering about a newfound forward potential, right? Both Mercury and Uranus like to shift things. They like to change things, right? They're both shapeshifters, and they both like to ask questions and to dissect and pull things apart, right? So there is a shift of energy potential here as these two planets are coming together here. And I'm wondering if this energy shift of potential makes us feel like pieces start moving, right? When I think of Mercury and I think of Uranus, I think of things shifting, and I think of them shifting kind of quickly. Like I'm thinking like puzzle pieces moving together, moving apart, trying to figure out what works together, or like a Rubik's cube where you start to change the try to change the squares to line up the colors, and you have to kind of like keep shifting it. It's like riddles, right? Mercury and Uranus, I think of like riddles coming through here too. So different parts moving together, different shifting of different energy potentials, and them mixing and intermingling. Mercury is in an air sign, it's in the sign of Aquarius, and Uranus, like we said, is in the sign of Taurus, an earth sign. So these different potentials coming together could be the mental realm and the physical realm, right? And those trying to kind of intermingle. So when you have ideas, the airy realm is up here, right? It's not the most tangible, and it's abstract, and there's lots of ideas. They can come and they can go. The material world, the earth, is down here, right? It's very dense, it's very physical. It doesn't shift and change quite as easy as air does, right? You can think of these elements physically and then put them in a symbolic form here for that metaphor there. So this energy shift here, right? When you have, so that's based on the phasal changes for these two planets here. Anytime you have these two planets coming together, you have the ability to communicate, think, or process things a little bit differently, right? Mercury represents our mind, our thoughts, communications, perceptions, things that go on up here, the mental things. And Uranus shifts things, right? We just said it's the disruptor, it's the awakener, it's the one that likes to bring changes here. So you could have unconventional thoughts and ideas, beliefs that are showing things that are against the status quo of the norm, and that feels innate to Mercury in the sign of Aquarius anyways, and then Uranus might just be kind of amplifying that a little bit. In the modern tradition, when we put rulers to the outer planets, which is not necessarily something that I subscribe to, but a lot of people do, in the modern tradition, they say that Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, right? So you could see the correlation there between Mercury being in the sign of Aquarius and then interacting with Uranus there too. I just only put rulerships for the traditional planets because it follows the rulership scheme. That's just what works for me. Whatever, you do you, whatever works for you, right? So the urge to move unconventionally, to think a little bit differently, inventive and ingenious thoughts coming through here, clever, swift, sudden shifts here. Remember how I said that they both change and shift quickly? There's a swiftness that can come through here. So new ideas coming in, right? And bringing them into the physical. Again, mentioning the air and the earth signs here. They're both fixed signs. So really, they need quite the catalyst to shift, but once they start to shift, it's kind of like a big rock or a boulder, right? Like it takes momentum to get it moving, but once it starts moving, then it's almost kind of hard to slow it down, right? So then you have the two different realms. You have the air realm and the earth realm with that happening. Mercury squaring Uranus, I think about messages of enlightenment. Mercury is the messenger god. Hermes is the god, the psychopomp that guides souls to and from the underworld, right? So it can bring messages from the spirit world into the material world, right? It can cross over those boundaries that are a little bit harder for, the denser layers to be able to penetrate here. So Mercury being the messenger and Uranus being the bringer of knowledge. We think about the myth of Prometheus, right? The god that brought knowledge and enlightenment and invention and technology to the humans, right? Stole the fire from the gods and brought it to humans, right? In the form of technology, information, understandings, enlightenment here. So messages of enlightenment coming through. Downloads, quick understandings, things that you might kind of miss them if you're not looking for them, because again, both of these planets are kind of quick. The square can bring tension, challenges, but also a place to grow from here, right? So maybe, discontent with the current situation leading into initiating changes or something like that. When I think of Mercury and Uranus, I also think about the ability to express yourself authentically, right? This right here dovetails off of that Leo full moon that we talked about earlier this week here as well, that authenticity coming back in here. The ability to speak bravely for what we're thinking, right? Sharing our thoughts, sharing our ideas, sharing the way that we are processing things and our perspective of things, and being able to do that completely. And within the fixed signs, being able to do that with the confidence to say, like, this is where I'm at. These are my thoughts. Here I am. This is what's going on in my head, right? And being able to stand on solid ground with that. So that's where we have coming through on Thursday. If we move forward from Thursday into Friday, just after Mercury makes that square to Uranus, it's going to move into the sign of Pisces. So this is the shift from air to water, and it's going to lead the shifts for the other planets that are going to follow it. This is also the sign of Mercury's upcoming retrograde, which is going to happen at the end of February. I think it's February 26th. So it's going to spend an extended period of time in the sign of Pisces, where normally it's only a few weeks. It's going to double its time frame. So if you have anything in those middle degrees of Pisces or the middle degrees of the mutable signs, those are going to be impacted by that retrograde period the loudest. And depending on the degree where that placement is, might have Mercury pass over it 3 times, through the direct motion, through the retrograde motion, and then back through the direct motion there. So check out what's going on in Pisces in your own chart for a little insight there, right? So the shift from air to water and the shift to a mutable sign. From a fixed sign to a mutable sign. The fixed signs are held within the middle of the season, right? They're holding the qualities steady. They are fixed in their notions, and then we move into the mutable signs. Now you're kind of in between seasons, right? This is like when you're not really sure if it's winter, you're not really sure if it's spring. In the Northern Hemisphere, this is the month of March for us. So in the mutable signs, we see fluidity, we see shifting, but in this mutable sign, Mercury is also within its detriment. So it's opposite Virgo, which is one of the signs that Mercury rules, along with the sign of Gemini. So what that means is that it's not the easiest place for Mercury to be in, right? It's not easy for Mercury to do the Mercury type things. Mercury likes to understand, it likes to pick apart, it likes to question, it likes to organize, it likes to compartmentalize, especially in the sign of Virgo. Some of the questioning and some of the dissecting might happen a little bit more in the sign of Gemini in a curious type manner. In the sign of Virgo, it's a little more out of necessity and a little bit more out of maybe dire situations in some kind, right? We have the impending dark half of the year that is going to be ushered in after the sign of Virgo, symbolically speaking from the zodiacal standpoint. So that's what Mercury likes to do, right? That's where Mercury is comfortable, dissecting, asking questions. In the sign of Pisces, we have that energetic sponge, right? We have the sign that reflects and accumulates and brings things in. That is a quality of water in general, right? Things accumulate and things gather in the sign of water. Water collects, right? Water accumulates and reflects. Based on what it brings in here. So when Mercury's in the sign of Pisces, it might feel like there is this mental energetic sponge that is really bringing it all in. That can open up our awareness, that can make our perception a little bit more sensitive, but it can also be a little overwhelming and a little overstimulating at the same time. It might feel like a little bit much to some of us here. It might be a little anxiety inducing. For others, it may just feel like we're able to connect because we're able to open up our perceptions a little bit and heighten our awareness and our sensitivity to different things. Mercury in Pisces can be very creative. It can be very understanding and empathetic. There is an otherworldly, romantic dreaminess quality to the sign of Pisces. So you see where these things are not quite like Gemini and Virgo, right? It's a little bit opposite of what Mercury likes to compartmentalize, right? It likes to organize and put things in boxes and see things as black and white, or understand things fully and completely into the details. Pisces is not necessarily so ingrained in the details, right? It's Jupiter's water sign, so it's looking at the bigger picture. It's expanding and it's bringing things in through water, right? Jupiter, water. In the sign of Pisces, there is a tendency towards reflectiveness, towards empathy, and towards the psychic awareness. So that's where you can have those subtle energy overloads, right? That heightened awareness or overload. So while Mercury's in the sign of Pisces, especially with the extended period here, it might be helpful for some of us to make sure that we're not taking too much in, right? We're not overstimulating ourselves, and we're not allowing too much to accumulate to make us feel overwhelmed, right? But opening up your perception to be able to slow down and empathetically reflect on situations and see what emotions stir from that, right? The collective space, the reflective space. This is the last sign of the zodiac here. So this is where we bring it all in and we review. We review and reflect what has occurred here. So this is Mercury moving into the sign of Pisces. If we go ahead and move forward here into Saturday, February 7th, after Mercury makes a square to Uranus, Venus is going to make the square to Uranus. This is a very Uranian week and very much about authenticity here this week here. So following that mental stimulation of Mercury making that square to Uranus comes our desires, what we wish for, what we want, right? Our relationships with people, our relationships with pleasure, with desire. In the sign of Aquarius, Venus may want to express herself slightly different than others anyway, right? We talked about an unconventionalness in the sign of Aquarius and with Uranus here. So just like with Mercury, we're doubling down on that, wanting to maybe go against the status quo, go against the norm, maybe do something a little bit different here. In aspect with Uranus, the urge to truly want to be authentic may be amplified from that space in Aquarius here. Again, authentic is a word that feels like it's going to come up for a lot of us here this week. Uranus in the sign of Taurus is in Venus's sign, so there's a reception between these two planets, which makes their connection a little bit stronger here, and they're able to understand each other a little bit easier, right? So maybe if Mercury and Uranus brought a little tension, maybe if it was a little bit scratchy, felt a little bit like sandpaper, you know, maybe it's kind of like the heavy grit sandpaper that comes through. Maybe as Venus comes through Uranus, you know, maybe we still have sandpaper that we're using, but we can use a little softer grit now, right? So we're not roughing things up quite so much. We start to see a little bit of shine, a little smoothness, and, you know, we start to get a little closer to the shine and to the polish, kind of like that. As the aspect with Venus comes through, I think this might really amplify the desire to embody the Taurian changes that Uranus has been bringing about externally, because we talk about Taurus being about embodiment through that earth sign, but it also comes from being Venus's sign, right? Venus dealing with the pleasure principle and desire and dealing with the senses, right? And what brings us harmony, what brings us balance here. There's a lot about embodying within the sign of Venus, or within the planet Venus here, right? So really embodying externally what we desire internally here might be coming forward. The freedom of expression in relationships, in aesthetics and ideas, being that we're in Aquarius in the air sign, and the desire to try something different, something exciting, something new, something unexplored may be coming up here. Or it may just be affirming what you have already discovered that you want to explore, right? Maybe it's sharing it externally. Again, air sign, communicating. It's still a square, so there might be some challenges that we're bucking up against, or it might feel like we really have to be extroverted about it, right? Like we might really feel like, no, I need to express this, I need to say this, I need to show this, I need to bring this out into the world, and you have that desire to take the effort, to take the movement and make the action to be able to go forward here. So squares are of the nature of Mars, right? So you think about Mars as action and movement here. So you might really feel motivated and have some ambition to go forward with whatever those awakenings and those stirrings are here within us. This can be a very liberating week for Mercury and Venus here, or at least the themes of such coming up, right? Authenticity, liberation, disruption, awakening, all of this is possible here this week. We start out with the full moon in the sign of Leo in the place of the sun, the place that wants to be able to shine outward. And then just after that, Uranus stations to go direct. So it starts to go from the internal awakening to the external awakening. And then it's going to get aspects from Mercury and from Venus, right? From two personal planets that are emerging from under the beams of the sun. They've recently just moved into a new phasal dynamic here and a new path, right? So they are starting down something new. They are initiating something new, and then they come into contact with the planet that has just shifted direction, that deals with awakenings, with shifting, right? You see how there's all these different shifts here. The astrology at the beginning of this year, guys, is just huge. It just keeps going and it just keeps going. And it's not that, you know, like the rest of the year is just null and void and blank. But the beginning of 2026 really packs a punch here. So it just feels like there's been a lot personally and collectively. I guess I just want to say, just know that the sky understands. Right. However you receive that, the sky understands, and that to me helps in a way that I'm not even really quite sure that I can describe. I can just feel it inside, internally, like Uranus in the retrograde period. So that's what we have for this week. We have shifts. We have Uranian. We have a full moon here. I hope everybody has a great week. I hope everybody is able to express themselves authentically. I hope that we are able to let our light shine while letting others' light shine. And I hope that instead of a me versus we, it can be a me and a we week, right? All right, if you've made it to the end of this video and you have not yet subscribed to the channel, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Liking, sharing, following, all of that stuff helps. And join us for our live meditation, Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to get together. We're going to talk about the astrology. We're going to look at the intention and we're going to sit with it. We're going to sit with it in a place of silent contemplation, right? That silent contemplation, that's where you create that personal relationship with the astrology. We can talk about the collective part. We can talk about the transits that are above all of us, right? Because they are above all of us. However, they're interacting with our own lives and our own birth charts individually here. So when we bring it down to that personal space and we have personal conversations with the astrology, with the sky, with the planets, with the gods and the energies and the universe and our higher self, or whatever term works for you, that's where it really gets personal, and that's where the relationship and the connection really begins and initiates. So I would love to walk this astrological journey with you in any way that suits you well. So everybody take care, have a great week, and I will see you next time. Bye now.